Good afternoon, good morning, everyone, wherever you are, from the US to Europe to the Middle East. This is Mahmoud Al-Barai, the Vice President of FIABCI Arabic countries. And I have great two speakers with us today. Robin Webb, who was the 2017 International CCIM President from the United States, and Joe Schneider, the Director of Engagement and Global Strategy from NAR, National Association of Realtors from the US. I'm very glad to have you both here today in a great session on creating a value proposition amid uncertainty. So welcome to the webinar and great to have you.
Thank you, Mahmoud.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for being with us. And I would like to welcome our FIABCI members and non-FIABCI members, whoever is watching us now live on Facebook or Zoom. Thank you so much for joining us today. We would try our best to make sure that this is a live session full of information and guidelines. So, well, let me start, Robin and Joe. I mean, this year has been actually extraordinary year. 2020 was the year of, we call it maybe the year of uncertainty, the year of risk, the year of COVID-19, the year of survival. So you both part of big international organizations in real estate industry. What has been the impact that such pandemics had and such a global outbreak had on your association activity? If we start with Robin.
Does it start with me, Mahmoud?
Yes, please.
You sort of fogged out there for a moment. Well, it's good to be with you, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about CCIM on an international basis. We have seen probably less impact than we initially feared. When COVID set in and we began in the US to have some civil unrest, we weren't certain what the year would look like, and I'm still not certain. We're certain what the year would look like 3/4 of the way in. However, our membership has remained stable. We are an education institute, and we educate, for those who are unfamiliar, in the commercial real estate profession, and provide a designation at the end of a 4-course series and a comprehensive exam. And some other criteria. And so education is extremely critical to the operation of our institute. Where we have seen the largest changes this year has been on the educational side. The inability to deliver live classroom training, which is what our institute was initially built upon, has caused us to really shift gears, if you will, and we did so instantly. By March, we were up and delivering online education. And thanks to platforms like WebEx and Zoom, we've been able to reach audiences in a positive sense that we otherwise might not have gotten to. In a more conservative sense, we've had to take classroom students who would prefer to be in a classroom and put them online in a Zoom style platform. So overall, our course delivery has been less. Our student count is down, but our membership is actually fairly static. We're about the same today as we were on January 1 of this year. Joe?
I would have to concur with Robin. I mean, from an NAR perspective, when COVID first hit, you would think that the world was on fire, and the associations, I think all associations, kind of braced down and expected the worst. It's kind of interesting. We just went through an exercise last week of looking at our goals that we set prior to COVID that we were trying to attain by the end of the year. And to be honest, a lot of them haven't changed. We had those 2 months where we really kind of had to pivot and ensure that we were delivering what our members needed at that time. But for the most part, NAR has really kind of weathered this storm. And to Robin's point about the membership, there's a strange anomaly in the US when other industries unfortunately were impacted by COVID, you know, the hospitality and all of the other kind of industries associated with that. People were unfortunately laid off from their jobs. So our membership has actually grown this year to an all-time record. We're at 1,400,000 and don't quote me on this, 1,430 something thousand. So we've actually had a great year in terms of membership. I think a lot of people dipping their foot into the business now that it's a little tougher to get into traditional industries.
Well, this is really interesting, Robin and Joe. I mean, initially initial thought is that we're going to lose members and people are not going to be committed to 2020 or 2021 because of loss of businesses or revenues. But saying that the revenue, I mean, the number of members increased, this is really incredible. I mean, this is, was this something expected from you at the beginning? I mean, were you expecting that there will be an increase in number of members, or it just happened this way?
We braced for a decline. We expected, don't know that we expected, but we prepared for a decline in membership. We certainly didn't expect to increase, and counter to Joe's point, we are about the same in terms of our membership. We're within literally 10 or 15 members to the exact count we were in January. So our membership hasn't changed much. We've been relieved to see we haven't lost them, but in all candor, we haven't gone through a renewal year either. That renewal cycle is coming up in the last 2 months of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
Joe, you talked about strategy. I want to add to the question because you talked about strategy, right? And this is interesting to see that the strategy has not changed so much since COVID-19. So what have been your first actions taken to face this pandemic, and which actually resulted in an increase in number of members?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say our actions were a direct result of the increase in numbers, but NAR, one of our strongest pillars that we have as an association, is our advocacy work in Washington, D.C. with our elected officials. So the very first thing that we did as an organization was ensure that our members were able to work. So when COVID first swept across the U.S., and this was done by individual states, but they shut down a lot of the industries to try to contain the spread of the virus. And so what NAR did is we worked with our elected officials at all three levels, the state, local, and national, to ensure that our members, NAR members and realtors, were considered essential workers and were still able to practice real estate during this shutdown of most industries. On top of that, again, having our members at the top of mind was really to ensure that they were included in the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Plan, which was the US's first stimulus bill. And we wanted to ensure that real estate agents, if needed, were able to take advantage of that program. And more broadly, not just real estate agents, but independent contractors. So as soon as this happened, our advocacy team just jumped into action and really did an incredible job at ensuring that realtors' interests were met.
I mean, great. If we just take 1 second and think about the value propositions of most of our associations and organizations is to provide face-to-face meetings, face-to-face opportunities, especially in an industry like ours. Real estate has been always about networking and connections and social. So how did you manage, and maybe start with Robin, how did we manage to keep this value proposition valid and convincing so members continue to be part of this organization? What changed in value proposition? What new things were added to be convincing?
Mahmoud, we spent a great deal of energy somewhat over communicating, not in the sense of email, but as much as we could do it through, again, online platforms, visual communication. So all of our current executive reports to our members, for example, now are all video. While we produce written reports, they're preceded by video. We have 53 chapters in the United States for CCIM. Each of those chapters has been encouraged to do monthly events, online events for their members. And so we've had a great deal of input from each of the chapters, as well as national. We've done monthly events that typically involve something around business. We've had some of the key economists and our own economist, excuse me, Casey Conway, who is one of the best reputed economists in the country, on screen on a very regular basis. And we've done different formats. We've done panels and individual presentations. We've encouraged participation. We've used the Zoom functions to the point that I think we've burned them all out. We've done surveys and inputs and all kinds of other things to keep our members engaged. I had the opportunity to participate last week in a chapter leadership training program, again on Zoom, but again with the idea of integrating the activity of the individual member into that of both the chapter organization as well as the national organization. And that seems to have kept our members pretty well engaged, as well as they can be without that ability to face-to-face network.
Mm-hmm. What about NAR, Joe? What has been done in terms of value proposition in such uncertain context?
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to really ensuring that our members have the tools that they need to succeed in this environment now, we actually brought back a program that was originally started in right after the 2008 financial crisis, called Right Tools Right Now. And what we did was we have, of course, NAR has a lot of products and educational courses and webinars that we provide to our members. Some of those have a fee associated with them, some are free. So what we did is we reimagined this Right Tools Right Now program. And this was kind of the brainchild of our leadership from our president, Vince Malta, and our CEO, Bob Goldberg. But the Right Tools Right Now program was taking these products that we would normally charge and create non-dues revenue for, and making them available to our members either for free or at a reduced discount. So I'm going to quote some of these numbers here because I don't want to mess them up. So we offered 443 different items from our product catalog to our members. To date, and this is from this year, we've had over 700,000 downloads or uses or people taking advantage of these. And so what we did, again, before this was something that we used to charge for. So we were able to kind of equate a value to it. So all of those, we were able to give away over $24 million worth of these tools to our members during this time. Again, to ensure that they have the tools and resources that they need right now to succeed in this altered environment.
From statistics and looking at business resilience numbers, a lot of research and survey shows that above 60% of businesses, not only real estate, but in general, don't have business continuity plans and they don't have resilience strategies. As association of businesses, have you seen this something really very clear in the industry that messes on that we don't have planning for such uncertainty, we don't have planning for such risky environment?
I think it's difficult to have envisioned a COVID or anything like it for any of us or any of our organizations. What I find, and I am a certified property manager as well as a CCIM, so I'm involved in two of the institutes. Both IRM and CCIM have prepared well, frankly, for the unknown. While we couldn't predict or project that there would be such a thing as a worldwide pandemic, we have substantial reserves financially. We have good resources within the organization, much like Joe alluded to with NAR, we have done a great deal of online free training, and yet continued our core program. So believe it or not, in the fuzzy year that's now almost behind us of 2020, we've still had 3,300 core students, meaning in our core courses, in a classroom environment. We run what you might call a post-CCIM education program, and we've had over 6,000 students in that ward class program. So I think we were well prepared, not for a specific event like this. I happen to have been the national treasurer for CCIM in the year of 9/11. And we did the same thing. We built multiple budgets. We built all kinds of contingency plans. And I think we learned some from that the reserves are critical. The business reserves, keeping our finances in order, understanding that we have a fallback position if we have to call on it. And fortunately, in neither organization have we had to call on those funds. And in neither organization have we seen a severe decline in membership. So I think as an organization, it's clear that preparation helps us evolve to the point that we can avoid disaster.
Mm-hmm. What about anything to add, Joe, on this?
I would echo a lot of the words that Robin had said. I mean, NAR is a member-led organization, and every year we do an extensive budgeting process, an inclusive budgeting process. And our members, we have a meeting in Chicago with over 100 of our members who are on what we call the finance committee, and that's led by the NAR treasurer. And then what they do is they'll talk about the budget. They'll hear from every different program area. They'll evaluate it. They'll ask questions. They'll ensure that it is something that really makes sense. And this year was a particularly challenging meeting. There are so many different things to consider. And, here in the U.S., we have COVID, but we also have a lot of civil unrest that's going on still, which is also causing a lot of questions that we're going to need to ask ourselves for the future of kind of real estate. So what we did is our members really extensively debated this. Same thing, built some different financial models. And, again, echoing Robin's words is thankfully we have not had to kind of dip into the reserves. And we've had that forethought in the future that, of course, we didn't expect a COVID or something of this nature to come along, but there's always a emergency on the horizon, so to speak. So there's always that one thing you have to plan for. And our members and leadership have always had that forethought to ensure that should something like this come along, that the association would be in good hands.
Mm-hmm. So how do you see your strategy developing as we are approaching end of 2020 and we're still having uncertainty into 2021? Any changes in the way that CCIM and NAR see the association? Any new direction? Any new maybe strategy that you're planning for 2021?
We are pretty much forecasting that membership will remain where it is. We are projecting tiny growth, quite candidly, with the idea that if we're wrong, we'll be wrong in the right direction. So if we miss our numbers because we've grown in membership, we'll be nothing but grateful. In terms of direction, we'll continue to do the things we're doing now for a time. We are planning to return to live meetings next year. Our first meeting is scheduled for April, and we are hopeful that finally we'll be able to get together and actually shake hands. And if we get together, we may not be able to shake hands, but if we can, we'll be together and be able to actually network. And so our largest objective for next year is to do as much face-to-face time as we can within reason and following the proper protocols while keeping people safe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we are in a similar boat. I mentioned earlier that we've actually had an increase in numbers. And real estate is a fairly easy industry to jump into. So we are being extremely conservative of how we don't want to go out and spend all of this extra money that we just received from this extra membership. Because, there's typically a lot of turnover, especially for new agents in the business. But this year has forced us to really do a lot of new things. For those of you who attended our virtual meeting in Washington, D.C., it was the largest meeting that we've ever had, largest convention we've ever had. We had over 25,000 people at that meeting. And then our virtual meeting is coming up here in the next couple of weeks, which would have been in New Orleans, but we had to move it to a virtual format, of course. So from a strategy perspective, we've understood and realized that we're able to reach and engage so many more people with this online model that moving forward, I would not be surprised if we do hybrid conferences where some are online, some are in person, to ensure that we are really touching as many members as we can and giving them access to the trends and to the opportunities that are present at our actual conventions.
Well, great. I just want to go back to the issue of online and digital, because actually one of the most important lessons of COVID-19 is digital transformation of organization. And this is not something complementary. This is a must for survival and competitiveness. Don't you think that people reach a point of being actually not very excited as they used to be at the beginning of the COVID-19? I mean, personally, I organized several webinars. We used to have more people at the beginning of the COVID-19, but you reach a point that you have so many of them and people kind of don't feel like very excited about being part of such online gatherings. I mean, do you see this happening?
I'm a senior CCIM instructor and work in the education program. And we laughingly talk about death by PowerPoint. And not to destroy your audience by too many slides and too much on the screen. I think the reality is most of us are sort of zoomed out. We've had enough Zoom calls and enough videos and enough sitting in an isolated environment without the inability to participate. So yes, I think there is a danger that you can overdo it. But to echo something Joe said, I tend to believe, and this is a personal opinion, not a decision by the Institute, that we will see most organizations going forward broadcasting their meetings. It will be interesting to see what type of impact that has on in-person attendance. But I think we've evolved to the point that our members expect to be able to go online and see what's going on in their organization. So we may be in sort of a simulcast world going forward where we have live meetings, but we see the preponderance of those meetings actually broadcast on some platform, whether it's Zoom or WebEx or Microsoft or some other platform.
Mm-hmm. I don't want to ask Joe the same question. If you have a different answer, Joe, or it's very similar?
It's similar, digital transformation from the association perspective, I think is, my answer doesn't really differ that much from Robin's. I will attribute some of the Zoom lackluster attendance to a couple things. I mean, from association people like myself, we're always trying to deliver value and always trying to bring more and more programs. And oftentimes, we forget that members are out there busy as all hell, especially right now in some of the residential markets in the US. We are not really seeing any declines year over year. So people are busy. But I kind of want to take a little different angle with that and COVID has kind of, I think, talking about more of a digital technology adoption, shifting to Proptech a little bit. This is really kind of ushered in, I think, Proptech 2.0. Not so much of innovation from the Proptech companies, but more of adoption of the existing technologies out there. Before, you really didn't have to change your business model that much. If you're interested in adopting a new Proptech company, you had to do a lot of upfront work. You had to adjust your back end of your company, train all of your agents, ensure they understood how to use that. But now the COVID pandemic has really forced people to jump in with both feet because they have no other option. So that's been something to see that's been really interesting, is kind of the emergence of the adoption of these Proptech companies. And NAR, of course, we have a venture capitalist company called Second Century Ventures, as well as tech accelerators called Reach, both in the US, Canada, the UK, and in Australia. And what we're trying to do is kind of find the best technologies from around the world that people are using in their everyday business and expand those and help our members really understand the value of those companies and how they can increase their business productivity by adopting some of those companies. So, we've been working on that for 10 years now, Second Century Ventures. And really, this has really helped kind of propel that initiative and giving them a bigger voice in kind of the real estate community.
Well, I just want to take a couple of questions from Yumna Ayman. One is to Joe and one is to Robin. So maybe start with Robin. How CMMI program is related to COVID-19 crisis impact on business? As far as I know, it is and all the certification. Is there any new added parts?
No, our platform remains the same. The variations have been the necessity to go online, firstly, and secondly, we require a certain volume of production, either as a principal or as a broker, or in some other capacity, and we require the education. The biggest challenge for us in 2020 was the comprehensive exam, because not only do we deliver 160 hours of classroom, at the end of all of that, there is a comprehensive exam that a student must pass in order to move from candidate to designee and to obtain the CCIM designation. So our largest challenge was, how do we test anywhere from 100 to 200 people at a time and not have them together? So rather than put the exam online, we did small cluster groups of anywhere from 8 to 15 people and tested them in a dozen cities across the country so that we could have them socially distanced, we could observe proper protocols, and still have each of them do a comprehensive exam. And I must say that it worked out extremely well. In the COVID environment, we've designated 111 new designees in 2020, and we will still do another small exam, similar in structure, before year end.
Thank you, Robin. A question similar, from Yumna again on the NAR tools right now. So Yumna is asking, I want to ask about the courses recommended to face the current COVID-19 situation that we all live in, as I found many courses that seems under the initiative tools right now. Is this something you want to answer, Joe?
Yeah, of course. So we haven't developed any COVID specific courses, but rather we have existing courses in that platform that are certainly helping in the situation. ePro being the one that kind of comes first to mind. And ePro is is a way to really ensure that you are able to stick out online, that you're understanding the different technical tools that there are for a realtor to, one, promote yourself, promote your business, and ensure that your clients kind of have that full, that supported throughout the full technology spectrum. So ePro is an extremely valuable course, especially in these times now, is probably the one that I would recommend the most.
Great. So let me continue with the questions. I mean, maybe there's some overlap with the previous question, but do you think that the current COVID-19 situation made the associations stronger or weaker? What is the role of professional associations in such a crisis? We've talked about technology, we've talked about education. Is there something beyond that? I mean, more on policy making, more on advocacy, more on speaking and being the voice of the industry?
I think it has caused us not necessarily to be stronger or weaker. I think it's more complicated than that. It has caused us to be very introspective, look inside and see who we are, what we're doing, how we're doing it, take a full assessment of the best way to do it as opposed to the way we've always done it. So you never wish for anything negative in your business environment, clearly. But I think it's given us an opportunity and a mandate to look at the way we do things. I know staff-wise, one of our large adjustments was having people work from home. We had never had anyone work outside the office. And so we've now determined that certain staff work well from home in terms of positions and things that they can handle. Other staff don't work well out of the office, again, when it comes to certain positions. And so what it's caused us to do is reevaluate everything from the space we're in and the way we're utilizing it, to the design of the office, to the functionality of having people work outside the office. So I don't think it's provided necessarily a weakness or a strength. I think it's allowed us to evaluate our weaknesses and strengths and to do sort of a SWOT analysis, if you will, of who we are, what we are, and the ability to deliver member services, which has become critical to any organization as we look at a point at the end of this year when, as we approach the end of our respective fiscal years, all of our members are going to make a conscious decision. Do I write this dues check or not?
Great. Joe, what about NAR? Anything beyond digitalization and technology and education?
Yeah, I would actually say this has strengthened the association. Much like Robin just explained, we had actually gone through this process about 3 years ago when Bob Goldberg came on as CEO of NAR. He did a lot of work to ensure that the organization was running as efficiently as possible. And so there's a lot of changes over the last few years, and I'm sure a lot of you guys saw those changes and are feeling those, and hopefully for the better. So we actually were able to, when this approached from an organizational structure, we were really set up for success right there. And of course, we had to pivot when we closed our offices both in DC and Chicago, and our staff is fully remote right now. But like I mentioned earlier, I think we are really coming out of this stronger. And the reason being is not a lot of industries, and I talked about this in the very beginning, but our advocacy team they're all rock stars, and they support our members in so many different ways. But the initial work that they were able to get done on Capitol Hill to ensure that our members were considered in all of these new stimulus programs, to ensure they were counted as essential workers, was something I think that really resonated with our membership, and really understood that NAR was there as an advocate for them, especially during these crises when these type of things really tend to shine. So I would say overall, I think we came out stronger and are set up for future success because of this. And again, no one likes to go through these drills at all. I mean, this is a major stressor, both from the business infrastructure to just the overall kind of emotions of the staff and everyone that goes involved with it. No one likes to do this, but Thankfully, we were set up for success, and I do think that we have a really clear roadmap moving forward from this.
Well, this is really very positive and great to hear it. Dear audience, if you have any questions, please do write them in the chat or the question and answer session. I have a question, maybe you haven't talked about it before, but we had an article here in Dubai's newspaper saying bye-bye brokers. This was the kind of the big title. So do you see this crisis is about making us as real estate agents or real estate professionals more of irrelevant? Are we really losing touch on the industry? And what are you doing as an association to keep agents relevant and important?
I think if COVID has shown us anything, it has emphasized the position and the value of brokers in a transaction. A number of our members, as a commercial organization, are deeply involved today with the negotiations that are going on between landlords and tenants, where tenants may have been closed for a number of months, if you're in the retail business, for example, and have no revenue, or if you're a restaurant. Many of our members have been the catalyst to solving problems and expanding the positive relationships between landlords and tenants. A number of our members are deeply involved in working with banks on an advisory basis, so that our banks are getting the benefit of the expertise developed through CCIM when it comes to how they're treating their borrowers. So I would take the opposite position, that not only is it not bye-bye to the brokers, Mahmoud, I would say it's hello brokers and welcome aboard, because I think if anything, during times of crisis, real estate brokers in all countries and at all levels really show their colors. It gives us an opportunity to say, here's how we can help you, the client, whether the client is a landlord, tenant, buyer, or seller. My personal background is in the hospitality industry, and I can tell you that I'm involved in every kind of conversation today, helping my clients get through some of the crazy things that are going on. And some of my clients, oddly enough, are growing by leaps and bounds through the actions of having good brokerage relationships and helping us to be able to connect through our own networking relationships those buyers and sellers as they are salvaging their businesses and going back to work.
I could not agree more, Robin. I mean, I'm assuming that article, Mahmoud, was in respect to iBuyers and, you know, the adoption of technology and things like that. I mean, iBuyers have been gaining steam for the last few years in the US. And really this COVID, you know, while contact was, you know, person-to-person contact was not something that anybody wanted to do, the table was set for these iBuyers to really, really thrive. And as I mentioned, we have not seen a dip year over year in the residential market in the US. Inventory and supply is so low right now that businesses stayed very, very steady for our agents. And again, the table was set for the iBuyers, and they have not gained any market share during the COVID crisis because there's still a lot of intangibles in a transaction that you need a broker to guide you through. So, you know, I think now more than ever that a broker's role is relevant and needed in a transaction.
Mm-hmm. No, great. I mean, this is good news. But don't you agree, Joe, that this also crisis taught us that if we don't adopt technology and digitalization, we may be left behind? I mean, how do you think that this pandemic accelerated the adoption of technology? And if our businesses, real estate, are ready for such change, do they need support from the association?
Absolutely. And that's what I had mentioned. This kind of ushered into the new era of adopting these technology platforms. From our association, you know, we have our Second Century Venture team and our Reach team who does a lot of the work with those companies to ensure that they know how a real estate business works, where they can adopt their models. Before real estate, I worked in tech, and often, you know, you set your targets on an industry and you say, I want to penetrate this industry, or I want to do this with this industry. And often those goals are misguided unless you really truly understand that industry. So what Reach and Second Century Ventures are doing is they're helping those companies, those tech companies that have a lot of promise for the real estate business and for the real estate practitioners, and really kind of, I don't want to say altering, but making sure that they understand their value proposition to a real estate practitioner and helping them along that journey to allow more adoption from the real estate practitioners, not just in the US, but around the world.
I couldn't agree with Joe more. It's, and to your point, Mahmood, yes, it has accelerated the necessary adoption of technology in multiple ways. Excuse me. We have an affinity program, for lack of a better term, that we use in CCIM that has a number of our technology support companies that we would use in the commercial venues as members. And so those affinity programs provide our tech companies an opportunity to not only market to our CCIMs, but it gives the CCIMs the opportunity to learn those disciplines and look at them more closely. It's one of the things that we believe strongly is part of our responsibility. We, for many years, ran a campaign that we called NET, Networking, Education, and Technology, because technology does play a clear role in everything we do. And so we help build the technology platform for the commercial real estate industry within CCIM and devoted substantial resources to it as far back as 20 years ago. So that growth continues, there is no doubt. And to the point, if people are unwilling to adopt and have been unwilling to adopt the technology in 2020, they're probably out of business.
Mm-hmm.
One thing to add on to that, Mahmood, and to take a little different angle, I mean, it's one thing for the real estate agents to kind of adopt these new technologies and pivot their business models a little bit, but that really doesn't matter unless you're really following the trends of what the consumers are wanting and what the consumers are doing. So that's another thing that, you know, NAR, our research team, has really focused a lot of their energy and effort on pulling consumers. And, you know, not just in technology, but across the board through different factors and different topics in the real estate industry. So, you know, we've kind of gone beyond our members and really wanted to hear what the consumers are using. And of course, I'm sure you've all seen our consumer ad campaign that is running across the US right now. I mean, that's something that we want to speak directly to consumers, because we can talk to our members till we're blue in the face. But if we're not helping the consumers understand the value of a realtor as well, then, you know, I would argue we're not doing our job as well. So it's kind of a two-prong approach of just the consumer education as well as our member education.
Speaking of consumers, Joe, I mean, what is it that consumers want? What are the emerging trends that we see in terms of how they like their real estate? I mean, just to give example of Dubai, we've seen a lot of shift from people buying or renting an apartment to move into villas, from going from small to big homes, from homes without balcony to home with bigger balconies. Do you see some, I mean, it doesn't have to be same trends, do you see something really developing from that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll take the approach from the residential market, and Robin obviously knows commercial more than anybody, but from residential, we had, in the very beginning, people they would call it an exodus from big cities. People were leaving big cities so they can have more space, a bigger yard, somewhere where they weren't so cooped up in their apartment or their condo or their townhouse, wherever they were, somewhere that they can get up in fresh air. And then we had the social unrest here in the US, which just exacerbated that a little bit. So we have seen a big shift from city living to more of a demand for suburban properties. So that, I think, has been the big thing. After 9/11, we saw that same exact trend starting to happen in the US. People didn't want to live in cities. But I think, as we all know on this call or on this webinar, is real estate is cyclical. I mean, if you look at New York before this happened, New York was, I would argue, one of the healthiest from a real estate economy than it's ever been. So, it will go back. Right now, suburban homes are kind of the trend. But I think, give it a few years, I think cities will come back in a big way.
I think if you look at real estate as a whole, what you typically find over a period of time is that commercial follows residential in its character. So as we saw the move to the CBD, the central business districts in most cities, we saw the CBDs become stronger and stronger in occupancy. They had the smallest vacancies in most markets in office, for example. As we see the exodus from the center city, we're also seeing a revival of suburban commercial real estate. So office markets are changing a bit, where we thought for many years that it was all about the central business district. We're now seeing suburban markets get stronger. The prediction is that while there may be smaller offices, or certainly differently designed offices going forward, that those offices will likely have larger conference facilities, and that buildings will more likely have larger common office facilities. So there is a move following residential of commercial to look more at the suburban markets. In other product types, we're seeing that renters, for example, the residential tenant has become a real player in most markets. And in certain markets, that construction has not been abated at all. I live in Orlando, Florida, and our apartment market is still absolutely on fire, and we still can't build enough apartments to satisfy the demand. And a dynamic of that is we normally have an in-migration of about 70,000 people a year into our local market. It was recently published in the local newspaper that number coming out of the Northeast particularly has now increased to 1,000 people per day moving to Central Florida. So that migration will impact not only residential, but in a very large way will impact our commercial, not only office, it will impact retail, and our industrial is already so tight that we're building as frantically as we can in order to get inventory just to satisfy normal need.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. This has been an interesting discussions, and I'd like to really thank you so much. But I have a question, and back to the value proposition. And again, we have also a few minutes for questions from the audience. But what is the role that we play as association to enhance real estate competitiveness?
Well, I think we have an obligation to pick up on something Joe said, to educate the consumer. In my world, that consumer is a bit different, but at the same time, in order to maintain our relevance, in order to maintain our value proposition to the client has to understand what we do and how we do it, and candidly be able to differentiate whether we're doing it well or not. If we expect to be relevant for the much longer term, we have to perform our services in a way that they're overt and visible and valuable to each of the customers. So whether your customer is a residential customer or whether your customer is a commercial client, the reality is unless we provide valuable services, we do lose our relevance. So from a practical point of view, I think we first have to educate our members and we then have to educate the public in order to be relevant for the longer term. And I think that's not a one-time proposition, by the way. I think it's an ongoing proposition and an evolving proposition, because what we do and how we do it changes certainly each year and maybe even each day to a certain degree. And in the current environment, who knows what tomorrow brings? And so our role will continue to change, particularly on the near term. And I think on the long term, we have to understand that we are an evolving industry, that we do integrate more technology today, that we do integrate different types of presentations, and all of those presentations hopefully are targeted to yield a certain result, and that result is value to the consumer.
Really well said, Robin. That's right. That's spot on. From NAR's perspective, and this is something that, you know, we've this whole webinar, we've talked about transition and what we've had to do to adapt to the new normal isn't so new anymore. I guess it's just the normal now. But what we've always done, I think, is going to set us up for success in the future. And what that is NAR is successful because we are a member-led and member-run organization. Our members understand what is happening on the ground. They understand what's happening in the industry. We are here to execute on their ideas and their direction that they want to take the association in. So that's one thing NAR prides itself on. And to Robin's point, this is something that we are always going to be successful with if we are going to remain an organization, is to listen to our members, understand why and what they are doing, and how we can best help them be successful in their business.
Great. I mean, yeah, please go ahead.
I would just add a quick comment where I think associations, and this is, as I warn my clients, the world according to Webb, which is sometimes flawed. I think where associations get off track is they forget who their customers are. An association customer is its member. Its members' customers may be someone different, but I think it's important for us as organizations to stay focused on those people who really help the organization to survive, and in a perfect world are running the organization. And those are our volunteers. Those are our members.
Great. There is a question if anyone wants to take. I guess you answered the second part of it, as do brokers, agents lose their relevance. But the question on what are your predictions for technology adoption over the next decade?
Joe, do you want to jump in?
Sure. Yeah. We kind of touched on this briefly, but you know, this COVID has kind of ushered in the adoption of more Proptech. And I think now that we have more users, when I say users, I mean actual practitioners going into the funnel of this Proptech industry. I think that we're going to see a little bit of a shift as we're getting more data and insights to actually what the practitioners are seeing and how they are really utilizing these technologies. So I do think that Proptech as a whole is going to expand and become more relevant within the industry. But again, I mean, I do not think that brokers are going to lose their relevance. Technology is relative. I mean, if you look at an MLS, and you know, I'll argue that MLS is not the most innovative technology. I might have tomatoes thrown at me when I walk outside, but MLSs, you look at the adoption of MLSs and where they came from. It used to be a binder with thousands of printed pages in it. Now it moved online. Now that information is available through real estate portals. Now, the way that practitioners manipulate and use that information to best serve their clients, that will change. Absolutely, that will change. But I do think that a broker will remain relevant in the transaction. But what their role in the transaction looks like in the future will definitely change.
Great. There was also a good comment from our friend Susan Greenfield, thanking everyone for the knowledge and valuable information. I just want to give you 1 minute each. Is there a final remark that you want to share with us before we end our session? I mean, it has been a great session, great speakers.
Well, thank you for allowing me to participate. I know Joe and I have known each other a number of years, and I'm honored to be on a platform with each of you. The industry will change. The adoption of technology will change. If we as professionals are in fact equipped and we keep up with technology and we stay ahead of the education opportunities and we perform, and that's the bottom line, for our clients, we will always be relevant. Our role will change to some degree. It always has and will continue to evolve. But as professionals, if we deliver professional service at a high level, our customers, quite frankly, don't want to do without us.
Mm-hmm.
That's well said. And Robin, it was a pleasure being on here with you as well. And Mahmoud, thank you as always for hosting this. And just to kind of wrap up here is, and I'll speak kind of from my personal perspective here is, you know, I was a realtor in the Bay Area and I worked in a consulting capacity for cities and municipalities and counties throughout California to set up special real estate programs within their cities. And then I jumped into the tech world and then kind of made my way back to NAR, back into the real estate industry. And I will say that this has been a trying year in so many different aspects. And just the level of just tenacity and grit and perseverance from our members to not only get through this, take care of all the other things that they have to take care of, their family, their personal lives, all that kind of stuff. But then to also be on the ball and but taking care of their clients has been something extremely, extremely gratifying and fulfilling to watch. And to be honest, I'm thankful that I have the opportunity to work with these members every day as my profession. So, you know, this has been, again, a trying year, but just hats off. And I'm just in awe of everything that our members have been able to accomplish during this time.
Thank you so much, Joe, and thank you so much, Robin. And we thank also our global partners that you see now in the background. I thank the headquarters, FIABCI, for organizing such a great events. We thank our partners and friends in NAR and CCIM. We've been always great friends and working together. And this is a difficult time, but the most important thing is that we don't forget the human side of us as a social animal. We're social animal at the end of the day. This is going to be over. We're going to be back to the normal life. Let's keep the lessons we learned and move on to the future. I would like to thank you again, the participants from FIABCI and non-FIABCI members. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm looking forward to have you with us in the future. Thank you, everyone, and good evening or good morning or good night, and see you hopefully face to face.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mahmoud. Thank you, Robin.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Mahmoud.
All right,
Thank you.
Take care.